The steam rose from the espresso machine like memories trying to escape, clouding the glass pastry case where my signature cinnamon rolls sat in neat, perfect rows. 6 months ago, these walls had been nothing but exposed brick and broken dreams. Now, they contained everything I had ever wanted. Penelope Ainsworth, failure, disappointment, family joke. All titles I'd carried for years, each one heavier than the last. But now I had a new title, owner of the Copper Spoon, the most talked about café in Millfield. My phone buzzed on the counter. My sister Natalie's number flashed on the screen. The same sister who had laughed the loudest when I announced my plans to cash in my meager savings and open a café downtown. "I hope you're calling to place an order," I answered, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued to pipe delicate rosettes onto a batch of cupcakes. "Pen." Natalie's voice was strained, missing its usual condescending lilt. "I need to talk to you about something. In person." I paused, the piping bag hovering over half-finished buttercream. "I'm working, Nat. Some of us have actual jobs that require our presence." That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." The hesitation in her voice made me stop completely. Natalie Montgomery, hesitant? The woman who had marched through life with the absolute certainty that everything she touched would turn to gold? "I'll be at the cafe all day," I said finally. "Come by whenever." "Thank you," she whispered, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the pre-dawn kitchen. Natalie Montgomery, thanking me. The world really had turned upside down. The bell above the door jingled at precisely 9:30, the morning rush just beginning to taper off. I looked up from the register to see Natalie standing in the doorway, her usual designer outfit replaced with something surprisingly casual. Her eyes darted around the cafe, taking in the exposed brick walls decorated with local art, the mismatched vintage furniture I'd collected from estate sales, the line of customers clutching coffee cups emblazoned with my Copper Spoon logo. "You can wait at the corner table," I told her, nodding toward the only empty spot in the room. "I'll be with you in a minute." She nodded, looking almost nervous as she made her way to the table. Several customers greeted her by name as she passed. Millfield wasn't a large town, and the Montgomery name carried weight here. Our father's construction company had built half the downtown area, including the building that now housed my cafe. "Your sister?" Maya asked as she sidled up next to me, already reaching for the next customer's mug. In the 3 months since I'd hired her, Maya had become more than just an employee. She was the first person who had believed in my vision, who had seen the Copper Spoon as more than just a rich girl's hobby. "The one and only," I confirmed. "Can you handle things for a bit?" "Go," she said, bumping her hip against mine to move me away from the register. "I've got this." I grabbed 2 slices of the lemon lavender cake, Natalie's favorite, though I'd never admit I remembered that, and made my way to her table. She was staring at her phone, her perfect manicure tapping nervously against the screen. "So," I said, setting the plates down with more force than necessary. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Natalie looked up, her eyes fixing on the cake with something like gratitude. "You remembered. Hard to forget when you demanded it for every birthday for 15 years straight." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "It looks different. I adapted the recipe. Less sugar, more lemon. Real lavender instead of that artificial extract Mom always used." She took a bite, closing her eyes briefly. "It's better. God, it's so much better." I sat down across from her, crossing my arms. "Natalie, what's going on?" You didn't come here to critique my baking skills. She set her fork down carefully, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the plate. Always precise, my sister. I got laid off. The words hung between us, impossible and yet inevitable. Natalie had been the golden child, the one who had done everything right. Business school at her father's alma mater, then straight into a corner office at Montgomery Construction. The heir apparent. Dad laid you off? I asked, unable to hide my disbelief. Robert Montgomery had never made a secret of which daughter he favored. Natalie laughed, the sound hollow and unfamiliar. No. Dad sold the company 6 weeks ago. Didn't even tell me until the papers were signed. The café seemed to fade around us, the ambient chatter of customers becoming a distant buzz. He did what? Sold to Greycorp Industries. They're keeping the Montgomery name for brand recognition, but replacing most of the upper management. She swallowed hard. Including me. Why didn't you tell me? The question slipped out before I could stop it, loaded with years of sisterly resentment. We hadn't had a real conversation in years, not since I'd dropped out of the business program Dad had insisted I join, choosing culinary school instead. I was ashamed. Natalie's voice was so small I had to lean forward to hear her. Everyone in town knows. Everyone except you, apparently. I thought you'd be happy to see me fall. The old Penelope, the one who had nursed wounds inflicted by her perfect older sister for decades, might have been. This new version, the one who had built something from nothing, found no satisfaction in Natalie's downfall. I'm not happy, I said finally. I'm just confused. Why are you telling me this now? Natalie looked up, her eyes meeting mine directly for the first time since she'd arrived. Because I need a job, Pen. And everyone says you're hiring. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Natalie Montgomery, who had once told me my little cooking hobby would never amount to anything, wanted to work for me. You're joking. I wish I was. She pushed her half-eaten cake away. I have 3 months of savings left. Dad always insisted I invest everything back into company stock, and well, that's worthless now. What about Marcus? I asked, referring to her husband, an investment banker with a penchant for sports cars and vacation properties. We're taking some time apart. Turns out Marcus was more interested in the Montgomery fortune than in me. The bitterness in her voice was familiar, it was the same tone I'd used when talking about my family for years. I should have felt vindicated. Triumphant, even. For years, I'd been the family disappointment, the one who had thrown away a real career for a hobby. Now, here was Natalie, humbled and desperate, asking for my help. But all I felt was tired. Tired of the rivalry, the resentment, the constant need to prove myself. I don't know, Nat, I said honestly. You don't exactly have cafe experience. I can learn, she said quickly. I've been managing people for years. I have an MBA. I can do bookkeeping, ordering, scheduling, whatever you need. I almost laughed at the irony. All those qualifications that had once made her the golden child, now being offered up to me like alms. Let me think about it, I finally said, standing up. I have customers to attend to. Relief and disappointment warred on her face. Of course. Thank you for listening. I watched her leave, her shoulders slightly hunched in a way I'd never seen before. Natalie Montgomery, humbled. The world really had gone mad. Maya appeared at my side, collecting the barely touched plates. Everything okay? I shook my head, still watching the door where my sister had disappeared. I honestly have no idea. Later that night, as I counted the day's receipts, another record day, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Seeing her name on my screen was still a novelty. Eleanor Montgomery hadn't exactly been supportive of my little project. "Have you spoken to your sister?" I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. My relationship with my mother had been strained for years, but especially since I'd opened the copper spoon. She had been convinced I would fail, that I would come crawling back to the family fold, properly chastened. "Yes," I finally typed. "She came by the café today." The three dots appeared immediately. "Did she ask you about a job?" So this was why she was reaching out. Not concern for me, but for Natalie. Some things never changed. "Yes," I replied. "And?" The dots appeared and disappeared several times, as if she was writing and rewriting her response. "Finally, your father and I think it would be a good learning experience for her." I actually laughed out loud at that. A good learning experience. As if working in my cafe was some sort of punishment, a cautionary tale of what happened to daughters who didn't follow the Montgomery path. "I'll take that under advisement," I responded, then turned my phone off completely. I sat there in the quiet of my cafe, surrounded by the day's lingering scents: coffee, vanilla, the sourdough we baked fresh each morning. All of it mine. Built with my own hands, my own vision. For years, I'd imagined this moment, success on my own terms, proving my family wrong. But now that it was here, victory tasted different than I'd expected. Less sweet, more complex. Like my lemon lavender cake, I thought with a wry smile. Less sugar, more depth. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe at my usual ungodly hour to find someone already waiting outside. Not Natalie, as I'd half expected, but my brother Elliot. "Little early for a pastry run, isn't it?" I asked as I unlocked the door, trying to mask my surprise. Elliot had always been the peacemaker in the family, the one who tried to bridge the gap between me and our parents, between me and Natalie. But even he had been scarce since I'd opened the copper spoon. "I figured this was the only time I could catch you alone," he said, following me into the dark cafe. Before the adoring crowds descend. I flipped on the lights, revealing his attempt at humor for what it was, a peace offering. "What do you want, Elliot?" He leaned against the counter, watching as I began the morning ritual of firing up the ovens, measuring out coffee beans, checking the prep list for the day. "Mom said you and Nat talked." "Mom says a lot of things." "Come on, Pen. She needs this job." I stopped, hands frozen in the act of tying my apron. Why should I care what Natalie needs? When has she ever cared about what I needed? Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache with unexpected homesickness. Not for the house I'd grown up in, but for the simpler time when my brother had been my confidant, my ally. "I know things haven't been great between you two. Between any of us, really. But Nat's, she's not doing well, Pen. The layoff, the separation from Marcus, it's hit her hard. So I'm supposed to give her a job out of pity?" I turned away, focusing on measuring coffee grounds into the industrial grinder. Because she's finally experiencing what it's like to not have everything handed to her on a silver platter? "No," Elliot said quietly. "You should give her a job because she's your sister. And because despite everything, I know you still care about what happens to her." I kept my back to him, unwilling to let him see the conflict on my face. "You don't know anything about me anymore, Elliot. None of you do. I know you kept that stupid macaroni art I made you in 3rd grade," he said, his voice gentle. "It's hanging right there in your office. I glanced toward the small room off the kitchen, visible through the open door. The framed artwork, a lopsided house made of pasta and too much glue, hung on the wall beside my culinary school diploma. "That's not the point," I muttered. "Isn't it?" Elliot pushed away from the counter. "Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You've proven to all of us that you're more than capable of making your own decisions. But just think about it, okay? For me, if not for Nat." He left as quietly as he'd arrived, the bell above the door jingling softly in his wake. I stood in the silent café, surrounded by the business I'd built despite everyone's doubts, everyone except Elliot, who had slipped me the name of a bank manager willing to take a chance on a young chef with no collateral but plenty of passion. I still had an hour before Maya and the other staff would arrive. With a sigh, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to the number Natalie had called from yesterday. "Be here at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." I did not add "or else." I didn't need to. Natalie had never been late for anything in her life. The next morning, I wasn't surprised to find Natalie waiting when I arrived at 5:45 a.m. She was dressed in black slacks and a simple button-down shirt, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "You're early," I observed as I unlocked the door. "You said don't be late." She followed me inside, her eyes taking in the darkened cafe with what looked like genuine curiosity. I didn't want to risk it. I flipped on the lights and headed straight for the kitchen. First things first. We bake everything fresh each morning. Today, you're on dishes and prep. That means washing, measuring, and setting up ingredients according to the recipes. Natalie nodded, setting her purse carefully on a hook by the door. "What should I wear?" "I have chef whites from a cooking class I took." "This isn't a cooking class," I cut her off. "And you're not a chef. You're a dishwasher. For now." I tossed her an apron, plain black, unlike my embroidered one. "This will do." If she was offended by the menial assignment, she didn't show it. Instead, she tied the apron with quick, efficient movements. "What first?" I pointed to the sink. "Wash up, then start on those bowls. I need to prep the sourdough." For the next hour, we worked in near silence, broken only by my occasional instructions and Natalie's quiet acknowledgments. I kept waiting for her to complain, to make some snide remark about the mundane tasks I'd assigned her. But she worked steadily, her movements becoming more confident as she found her rhythm. By the time Maya arrived at 7, Natalie had prepped all the ingredients for the day's baking, washed several loads of dishes, and was carefully measuring flour for the scone recipe I'd left out for her. "Whoa," Maya said, stopping short when she spotted Natalie. "Did I miss something?" "Maya, this is Natalie, my sister," I said, not looking up from the cinnamon roll dough I was rolling out. "She's on a trial run. Natalie, Maya is my assistant manager. Anything she tells you to do, you do it." I caught the quick look that passed between them, Maya's surprise, Natalie's determination. This wasn't going to be easy for either of them. "I was going to have you handle the register today," Maya said slowly, "but maybe Natalie could take that? Since she has customer service experience?" I almost laughed at the diplomatic way she phrased it. Customer service experience. As if managing million-dollar construction deals was the same as ringing up lattes and pastries. "Fine," I said, wiping flour from my hands. "Natalie, Maya will show you the register system. Try not to scare off the customers with that boardroom glare of yours." Natalie's lips thinned slightly, but she nodded. "I can handle a cash register, pen. I worked retail all through college, remember?" I did remember, suddenly. Natalie folding sweaters at that boutique in the mall, coming home with sore feet and complaints about entitled customers. It was before Dad had fast-tracked her into the family business, before she'd become the golden child. Back when we were just sisters, sharing a bathroom and arguing over whose turn it was to do the dishes. Right, I said, the memory catching me off guard. Well, good. That's good. The morning rush hit like a tidal wave, as it always did. I watched from the kitchen as Natalie handled the register with surprising efficiency, greeting customers with a warm smile that I hadn't seen in years. There were a few hiccups, a wrong order here, a forgotten pastry there, but overall, she managed. She's doing all right, Maya said during a brief lull, popping into the kitchen to restock the pastry case. Better than I expected, honestly. Day 1, I reminded her. Let's see if she makes it through the week. But Natalie did make it through the week. And then another. She learned the register system, memorized the menu, even started picking up basic barista skills from Maya. She never complained about the early hours, the demanding customers, or the fact that her designer clothes were gradually being replaced by more practical attire suitable for café work. You should let her try baking something, Maya suggested at the end of Natalie's 3rd week. She's been studying those recipes of yours every chance she gets. I looked up from the books I was reviewing, another record week for the copper spoon. She has? Maya nodded. Yesterday, I caught her taking notes on your raspberry scone technique. Said she wanted to understand why they came out flaky instead of cakey. I frowned, trying to reconcile this image with the sister I'd known, the one who had mocked my obsession with flour and butter when I'd announced my intention to attend culinary school. Fine, I said, closing the ledger. Tell her she can try the basic muffin recipe tomorrow. Under your supervision. Maya grinned. She'll be thrilled. It's just muffins, I muttered, but I couldn't help feeling a twinge of something. Pride? Curiosity? I wasn't sure. The next morning, I arrived to find Natalie already there, not just waiting outside but inside the kitchen, an apron tied around her waist and her hair neatly tucked into a cap. Maya gave me a key, she explained quickly, seeing my expression. She said it was okay since I'm opening with her now. I set down my purse, taking in the scene before me. The kitchen was immaculate, as always, but there was something different. A bowl of batter sat on the counter, and a tray of muffins, still warm, judging by the steam rising from them, rested on the cooling rack. You made muffins, I said stupidly. Natalie nodded, a hint of nervousness in her gesture. Maya said I could try the basic recipe. I got here early to practice before opening. I approached the cooling rack cautiously, as if the muffins might bite. They looked good. Golden brown, evenly risen, with a nice crackly top. They're blueberry, Natalie added unnecessarily. Your recipe said any berry would work, and I remembered how you always chose blueberry when we were kids. I had. Blueberry had been my favorite, while Natalie had always gone for chocolate chip. Mom had only baked on special occasions, claiming she didn't have time for such nonsense, but when she did, those preferences had been honored. I picked up a muffin, feeling the perfect balance of weight in my hand. When I broke it open, steam escaped, carrying the scent of vanilla and fresh blueberries. The crumb was moist but not soggy, with berries evenly distributed throughout. Well? Natalie asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. I took a bite. The muffin was perfect. Exactly as I would have made it myself. Maybe even better, with a hint of lemon zest that wasn't in my original recipe. You added lemon, I said, taking another bite. Natalie nodded. Just a little. I remembered how you always said blueberry needed acid to balance the sweetness. I had said that years ago, during one of my early baking experiments in Mom's kitchen. I hadn't thought anyone was listening. It's good, I said finally. Really good, actually. The smile that bloomed across Natalie's face was like sunrise, unexpected and beautiful. Really? You're not just saying that? When have I ever just said things to make you feel better? I asked, the question coming out sharper than intended. Her smile dimmed slightly. Fair point. I set down the muffin, suddenly uncomfortable with the moment of connection. We should get started on the rest of the morning baking. The day proceeded as normal, or what had become normal over the past 3 weeks. Natalie ran the register during the morning rush, then helped with prep and cleaning during the lull before lunch. But now there was a new tension between us, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. As closing time approached, I found Natalie in the office, carefully reviewing the day's receipts. She looked up when I entered, a small crease between her brows. There's a discrepancy in the afternoon totals, she said. I think the new kid might have voided a transaction incorrectly. I leaned over her shoulder, scanning the numbers. You're right. We'll have to adjust the register count. Natalie made a note on the ledger, her handwriting neat and precise. I can show him the right way to do it tomorrow, if you want. I straightened, struck by the strangeness of the moment. Natalie Montgomery, offering to train a barista on proper cash handling procedures. The world really had gone sideways. That would be helpful, I said carefully. Thanks. She nodded, returning to the ledger. I watched her for a moment, trying to reconcile this diligent worker with the sister who had once dismissively called my café dreams adorkable. Why are you doing this, Nat? I asked abruptly. She looked up, confusion clear on her face. Doing what? The books? All of it. The early mornings, the register, the muffins. Why are you trying so hard? She set down her pen, considering the question. Because I need the job? Don't BS me, I said, crossing my arms. We both know you could get a job in any office in town with your resume. Instead, you're here, washing dishes and making change for $5 an hour plus tips. Why? Natalie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the ledger. Because I needed to understand, she finally said. Understand what? You. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine directly. All these years, I never understood why you threw away everything Dad offered you to do this. She gestured around the tiny office. I thought you were being rebellious. Difficult. That you'd eventually come to your senses and join the family business. I leaned against the doorframe, waiting for her to continue. But then you actually did it. You opened this place, and it's amazing, Pen. Everyone in town talks about it. About the pastries, the coffee, the atmosphere you've created. She shook her head slightly. And I realized I'd never even tried to understand why it mattered to you. So you decided to scrub muffin pans at dawn to figure it out? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. I decided to see what was so special that my little sister would risk everything for it, she corrected. And I think I'm starting to get it. Oh really? Please, enlighten me. Natalie flinched at my tone but pressed on. It's about creating something that's entirely yours. Something real and tangible that people enjoy. It's about crafting an experience, not just a product. She paused, her eyes drifting to the window that looked out onto the café floor, now empty except for Maya sweeping up. And it's about bringing people together, isn't it? Building a community around something as simple as coffee and pastry. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. That was exactly it. All the things I'd never been able to properly articulate to my family, the reasons why a corporate career had never appealed to me. Anyway, Natalie continued, mistaking my silence for dismissal, I know you only hired me as a favor to Elliot. But I'm grateful for the chance, Pen. Really. I moved to the desk, sitting down across from her. I didn't hire you as a favor to Elliot. She looked up, surprised. You didn't? No. I hired you because. I paused, not entirely sure myself why I'd made the decision. Because you needed a job. And because maybe I wanted to see if you'd actually do it. If the great Natalie Montgomery could humble herself enough to work for her failure of a little sister. Rather than looking offended, Natalie nodded slowly. That's fair. I haven't exactly been supportive of your choices. That's putting it mildly, I said dryly. You laughed in my face when I told the family about my business plan. Said I'd be back to begging Dad for a job within 6 months. I was wrong, she admitted quietly. About a lot of things, as it turns out. The simple admission hung in the air between us, more powerful for its rarity. Natalie Montgomery, admitting she was wrong. The apocalypse must truly be upon us. Your muffins were good, I offered, a peace offering of sorts. Really good, actually. You have a knack for it. A small smile touched her lips. Thanks. That means a lot, coming from you. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the café's refrigerators and the distant sound of Maya's sweeping the only interruptions. Mom's been asking about you, Natalie said eventually. About whether you might come to Sunday dinner this week. I stiffened. Sunday dinner at the Montgomery house had once been a mandatory affair, filled with thinly veiled criticisms and constant comparisons between the three of us kids. I hadn't attended in over a year, not since the disastrous announcement of my business plan. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. Natalie nodded, as if she'd expected the response. Maybe not. But things are different now. Dad's not as. She trailed off, searching for the right word. Dictatorial? I supplied. She smiled slightly. I was going to say involved, but sure. The sale of the company hit him hard. He's been quieter. More reflective. Reflective Robert Montgomery. Now that's something I'd have to see to believe. You might be surprised, Natalie said. We all are, I think. I studied my sister's face, noticing for the first time the faint lines around her eyes, the slight slump to her shoulders that hadn't been there before. The last few months had aged her, changed her in ways that went beyond the surface. I'll think about it, I said finally. No promises. Relief flickered across her features. That's all I'm asking. Maya appeared in the doorway, keys in hand. All locked up. You two about done? I nodded, standing up. Just finishing the day's count. I'll take care of it, Natalie offered. You should head home. You've been here since before dawn. I hesitated, still unused to trusting her with such tasks. But she'd been handling the closing counts all week without issue. Okay. Just leave the final numbers on my desk. As I gathered my things, Maya caught my eye, giving me a subtle thumbs up. I rolled my eyes in response, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for the Montgomery sisters yet. The invitation to Sunday dinner sat on my counter all week, a heavy cream envelope with my mother's precise handwriting across the front. Natalie had slipped it into my purse on Friday, not saying a word but giving me a look that was half hopeful, half pleading. By Sunday morning, I still hadn't decided whether to go. The Copper Spoon was closed on Sundays, my one concession to a normal work-life balance, and I'd planned to spend the day testing new recipes for the fall menu. But the envelope kept drawing my eye, a physical manifestation of the choice before me. Continue the estrangement, the comfortable distance I'd established between myself and my family. Or take a step toward, what? Reconciliation? Understanding? I wasn't sure such things were possible after years of mutual disappointment. At 4 o'clock, I found myself standing in my closet, staring at my limited selection of non-work clothes. If I was going to Montgomery Manor, the ridiculous name my father had bestowed upon our family home when his construction business first took off, I'd need to look the part. The Penelope who had grown up in that house would have worn something deliberately provocative, ripped jeans, perhaps, or a shirt with an inappropriate slogan. Just to watch Eleanor's lips purse in disapproval. But that Penelope felt like a stranger now, a character I'd outgrown. Instead, I selected a simple sundress, blue with tiny white flowers, and a light cardigan. Respectable but not trying too hard. A visual declaration that I was my own person, not seeking approval but not deliberately courting disapproval either. The drive to Montgomery Manor took exactly 12 minutes, a journey I'd made hundreds of times but not in over a year. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noted that Elliot's car was already there, as was Natalie's. Gang's all here, I thought grimly. Before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Elliot, a beer in hand and a surprised smile on his face. "Holy shit, you actually came," he said, pulling me into a one-armed hug. "Nat said she'd invited you, but I didn't think you'd show." "Neither did I admitted, returning the hug before pulling away. "Is it terrible already?" He shrugged. "Dad's on his second scotch and Mom's been rearranging the table settings for an hour. So, standard Sunday dysfunction." I followed him through the foyer into the formal living room, where my parents sat in their usual positions, Robert in his leather chair, tumbler in hand, and Eleanor perched on the edge of the sofa, back straight as a ruler. "Penelope," my mother said, her surprise evident despite her attempt at composure. "How unexpected." "Mom." "Dad." I nodded to each of them, resisting the urge to fidget with my dress. "Thanks for the invitation." Robert Montgomery regarded me over the rim of his glass, his expression inscrutable. "Heard your café is doing well." It was as close to approval as I'd ever get from him, and we both knew it. "It is. We're expanding our hours next month to include dinner service on weekends." "Ambitious," he commented, and I couldn't tell if it was praise or criticism. Natalie emerged from the kitchen, an apron tied over her designer dress and a faint smudge of flour on her cheek. "Pen. You came." The genuine delight in her voice was almost enough to make the awkwardness worth it. "I did." I offered a small smile. "Need any help in there?" "God, yes," she said with feeling. "Mom's trying to micromanage the roast, and I'm about to lose my mind." I followed her into the kitchen, where the familiar scent of Eleanor's Sunday roast filled the air. It was a strange comfort, one that brought back memories of both pleasant family dinners and tense, silent standoffs. "You're on vegetable duty," Natalie informed me, pointing to a pile of asparagus on the counter. "Mom insists on them being exactly the same length." I snorted, picking up a knife. Some things never change. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the rhythm of food preparation familiar and soothing. Thanks for coming, Natalie said eventually, her voice low. It means a lot. To all of us. I focused on trimming the asparagus, keeping my tone light. Well, I was promised roast beef. Hard to pass that up. She smiled, seeing through the deflection but allowing it. Sure. The beef. Not the charming family dynamics or stimulating conversation. Definitely not those. The kitchen door swung open, and Eleanor appeared, her critical eye immediately assessing our progress. Penelope, those asparagus should be at a 45-degree angle, not straight across. I bit back a retort about the non-existent impact of cutting angles on taste, instead offering a bland, yes, Mom. To my surprise, instead of micromanaging further, Eleanor simply nodded and turned to Natalie. The table needs the good silver. Your father has decided this is a special occasion. After she left, Natalie and I exchanged a look. Special occasion? I asked. Natalie shrugged. You're here. That's special enough. The thought made me uncomfortable, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the asparagus. Perfect 45-degree angles, just as ordered. Dinner itself was a strange affair. The food was excellent. As always, Eleanor Montgomery might have her faults, but cooking wasn't one of them. The conversation, however, flowed in fits and starts. My father, normally dominant in all family conversations, seems unusually reserved, allowing Elliot to carry most of the discussion about his latest architectural project. My mother frets over the serving temperatures and plate presentations, filling silences with questions about whether the meat is too rare or the asparagus too fibrous. Natalie catches my eye across the table occasionally, her silent support a strange new comfort. This tentative piece feels fragile, like pastry dough rolled too thin, one wrong move could tear it beyond repair. So, Penelope, my father finally says as dessert is served, setting down his tumbler with deliberate care. I drove by your café yesterday. I tense, waiting for criticism. Oh? The line was out the door. He cuts a precise bite of Eleanor's apple tart. It appears your business acumen was sound after all. The admission, begrudging but unmistakable, hangs in the air like a held breath. Elliot stops mid-chew, eyes darting between us. Natalie smiles into her napkin. Thank you, I say simply, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my surprise. Your sister seems to be learning a great deal there, he continues, eyes fixed on his dessert rather than meeting mine. She's a quick study, I concede, and I mean it. In the month since Natalie joined the Copper Spoon, she's mastered skills that took me years to develop. Perhaps there's something to be said for forging one's own path, my mother interjects, her usually critical tone softened by something almost like pride. Later, as I prepare to leave, Natalie walks me to my car. The evening air is cool against my skin, carrying the scent of Eleanor's prized roses. That wasn't so terrible, was it? She asks, hugging her cardigan around herself. I lean against my car door, considering. It was different. Good different? Just different, I say, but I'm smiling slightly. Your blueberry muffins are better than Mom's apple tart, by the way. Her face lights up at the compliment. High praise from the master baker. We stand in comfortable silence for a moment, the distance between us not quite gone but narrower than it's been in years. See you tomorrow, she asks, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. I nod, opening my car door. 6 a.m. Don't be late. I won't, she promises, and I believe her. As I drive away from Montgomery Manor, I realize that success tastes different than I'd imagined, less like vindication and more like possibility. The cafe I built to prove my family wrong has instead become the bridge that might finally bring us together. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in finding your way back to each other, one perfectly baked muffin at a time.